to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm so excited to have on the show today Mr. Ross Rosenberg. Hey, Ross, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. In fact, this is going to be the highlight of my day.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been excited getting ready for this point, waiting to do this with you. Where are you calling us from, Ross?
And a suburb of Chicago named Arlington Heights, Illinois.
That's awesome. Well, I'm up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The magic of the internet, we're connected. So let's go. I want to turn it to you, Ross, because the show is all about you. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a psychotherapist. Been in practice for almost 32 years. I'm an author. I wrote a few books. The last one is The Human Magnet Syndrome, the Codependent Narcissist, the Codependent Narcissist Trap. I'm a professional trainer. I own a counseling center. I own a self-help professional development company called Self-Love Recovery Institute. And I have a presence on YouTube where I have about 105 videos that I think have been viewed about 10 million times.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I wanted to get a little bit about you, but I'm going to build you up here because it's important that the audience knows the backstory. So, there's so many great things you told us, Ross. I'm just going to pick off a few things. I know that you're an international speaker as well. I know you're a best-selling author. I'm blown away by the fact that your first book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, Why We Love People Who Hurt Us, in 2013, sold over 70,000 copies. That's just incredible. Also a professional trainer, as you mentioned, and people consider you an expert in your field on codependency, trauma, narcissism, gaslighting, and sex addiction. Wow. And I got to tell you that in the work I do with executives, senior leaders, I've come across some of these terms in the workplace, not from those leaders, but from people who work with them, saying things like, my boss is a narcissist. They don't even understand what that means. Your work on codependency and narcissism, trauma, self-recovery, all these things you talked about has earned you international recognition. And so we're honored to have you on the show. I want to mention your first book. That was The Human Magnet Syndrome. But the second one is really what got my attention, Ross. And the second one was published recently, The Human Magnet Syndrome, the Codependent Narcissist Trap. I read that book twice. I had my wife read it, and we learned so much from it. And so here we are, and I want to turn it back to you, but I want you to start with the backstory. This is about checking the ego at the door. We have people on who are successful like you, but it all started from a certain point, and sometimes those points aren't always good. There's ups and downs along the way. So, take us into your story, Ross.
It's interesting that you asked me about my backstory because when writing the second version of the Human Magnet Syndrome, the one that is considered new, I decided to make the first chapter a story of not only my generation and why I became this codependent person and always fell in love with harmful narcissists, but I wanted to add some empathy and explanation to my parents' generation. And then I went as far as my grandparents and my great-grandparents. And I believe that for us to connect to others, to help them, to provide them with solutions to problems that they've up until that point had no hope for, knowing that you've experienced the same pain and suffering that they have makes all the difference in the world. So in a nutshell, I was raised in a family, pretty dysfunctional family, of a pathological narcissist father and a codependent mother, and had a very emotionally traumatic childhood. And I came out of that childhood with this, what I call this relationship template of this feeling of automatic reflexive comfort to people that were narcissists, self-serving, selfish, egotistical. And I had been married and divorced a couple times when finally I had to ask myself, what's wrong with me? Because it was easy for me to find out, I could talk all day about what was wrong with the two narcissists that hurt me that I divorced. But it was once that I realized that there was something about me that felt comfortable and familiar with these harmful narcissists. That was the beginning of my discovery that would become the Human Magnet Syndrome. And from there, I wrote that book in 2013, and then in 2017, I rewrote it and expanded it significantly. And now it's in four languages. So the backstory is really a guy who was codependent and who didn't want to be in pain anymore and wanted it to stop, and took responsibility by searching for what made him do that made those choices. And from there, I created solutions and hope and help for others.
Well, that's pretty amazing. Well, first of all, Ross, catch your breath there, because I want to honor you for what you've told us. I mean, coming on public radio, and I know they call you a global phenomenon with your YouTube channel. You know, I was looking at that 10 million video views. Wow, that's incredible. But to be able to come on time and time again and just declare your story, what I call the heroic story, we just honor that. We're so proud to hear that. You take me on a journey in so many directions in my head, and I wanted to say a couple things. One is that as you were talking, I remember watching a YouTube video somewhere called What the Bleep. And in that, I learned about peptides. I wrote a blog on that called Peptides of Change. And they say that, you know, it's like a rush, these peptides in your brain. You want this rush, so you're in a dysfunctional relationship. All of a sudden, it gets better, and you do something to mess it up, or you go looking for that pain again. What I'm blown away by you is you found a way to discover that something was within you triggering that. So I want to ask you this question. Are people born as narcissists, or born this way because they come into the world innocent and golden? How does this happen?
Well, narcissists and codependents are created within a dysfunctional childhood environment that is occupied by a narcissistic parent and a codependent parent. To understand what I call the attachment trauma, the trauma of not being attached to nurturing, unconditionally loving, unconditionally caring and respecting parents, creates severe psychological problems that play out later in life. In my book, I talk about, I use the metaphor vitamin L to make my point. We know that as children, you need certain essential vitamins to help your body and your brain grow, so that when you become an adult, you will be fully functional and at your best. But if a child grows up without, vitamin D or, vitamin E or vitamin C, he's going to have, deleterious medical situations. And so without love, respect, and care as a child is not getting what she or he needs and has to choose a direction to cope. So a child who learns how to cope with a narcissistic parent who's harmful, and they become invisible. They become the good listener. They become the sympathetic person. They become their parents' trophy child. They found a way to, one, is to mitigate or buffer the potential of the narcissistic parent's abuse, because narcissists will hurt people that don't make them feel good about themselves. And they witness that in their own family with their siblings and their other parent. But two is they find a way to be useful by sacrificing themselves and becoming invisible. So another child in the family, and whenever there's a sibling group with a narcissistic parent and a codependent parent, there's two directions the siblings go in. The child who cannot find a way to be the parent's trophy child, cannot find a way to make the parent feel proud about himself or herself, to feel good that you make the parent feel good about themselves, they don't get any positives. In fact, they become a walking target upon which the narcissist throws angry darts, not the narcissistic injury. So the same family but different child cannot figure out how to make their parent feel good about themselves, becomes the bad child, the bad seed. That's the trajectory for the child who's going to grow up to be the narcissist. So in a nutshell, the attachment experience in our childhood makes us healthy and teaches us what we about relationships in adulthood. If you survived a narcissistic parent by becoming invisible and becoming a human doing instead of a human being, you take that relationship template and it becomes the power of the human magnet syndrome in adulthood, and that's what you feel comfortable with when you are seeking a partner.
That's fascinating, Ross. And I was thinking about the workplace. So let me just take you there for a minute.
Sure.
In that I've met many people through my coaching, and there is a situation, I'll keep it confidential, of a leader in a company locally that has a boss that they refer to this person as the narcissist. And sometimes when I'm coaching and listening to this person who are so unhappy and they won't break those chains, I kind of ask myself the question, what are you pretending not to know? Why are you still there? We see this all over corporate America with people who come from broken beginnings, who become leaders and become these narcissists.
Right.
What advice can you give, or how do you deal with that in the workplace? Are there parallels to relationships
Oh,
outside of it?
absolutely. It's funny you say that, because well before I created my human magnet syndrome explanations, I wrestled with the idea that narcissists gravitate towards leadership positions, administrative positions, management positions. And how I reconciled it in my own field, and I'm sure it's the same in other fields, is that there are people that can do the job well, um, and enjoy the job. But if you don't get along with people, and your job requires you to get along with people, then you want a job in which you can use another part of your personality. And people who are smart and talented and or pathological narcissists, that disorder, that psychopathology, gives them the edge in a career field that rewards aggressiveness, competitiveness, uh, um, um, value determined by profit, ability to like hire and fire and not be phased. So the traits of pathological narcissism are traits that help someone climb up the ladder, and often, depending on many companies, a backbiting, backstabbing ladder to success. And that is why there are so many narcissists in these higher level management positions, because the the ascent to that position, or the company culture, actually rewarded the very traits that we understand are unhealthy or pathological.
What are some of the things that corporations or even business owners can do in their organizations to maybe prevent that? Are there tools or systems, processes, things that can be put in place, or is that really just a factor of, or a function of, performance management, where we have to train managers to be able to identify somebody who's a narcissist and then be able to maybe manage them to get help?
No, neither of the two are fair solutions. I mean, the solution is, and the only solution is, to have at the core on the executive level,
Yeah.
is to have uh, people running the company who have healthy um, boundaries, healthy expectations on how to treat people. I mean, you still can, make money, and you still can hire and fire people and do what you need to do to make money. But if you are running the company and you respect people, and you treat them well, and you don't promote an environment of backbiting, lying, manipulation, um, and you are the leader, the culture comes together under that leadership, and then the people that you hire will easily adapt to that. So if you have a culture of a, say someone, they call them servant leaders, and they try to perpetuate that type of culture and environment, the narcissist doesn't feel at home. The narcissist actually, it seems very obvious and very uncomfortable. And the culture automatically responds to it as something that needs to go. So the way to handle it is to have leaders or leadership that believe, and despite the need to make money and build business profits and growth, is to have some level of respect, caring, and fairness.
I just love that, Ross. You gave us such a great leadership lesson there for those who are listening. I just want to share with you a personal experience that I was confidentially in an assignment recently inside of a company that is a multi-billion-dollar company, and I was on the ground floor just with the employees. And as I sat and looked up in the lunchroom, they had all these value statements and things on the wall, and then I came across one that was really unique, and it was a diversity program, and it said if you have any concerns or issues, these are the layers you can escalate that to. One was your manager, but then they had the name of the vice president of HR, the name of the person above that, name of the person above that. So the thing I take away from this and what you said is that, I've worked in bad cultures where if you have a narcissist boss, you just can't say anything. You might as well just die or leave the company.
Right.
I'm seeing companies today putting in processes so that at least you can find some way to communicate. So love your thoughts there. I want to ask you a question about a word that I found in your book, and that's gaslighting. Got to be honest with you, I thought it was about lighting my furnace until I read further. So I think I know something about this given my toxic childhood, but tell us about gaslighting. What does that mean in this big picture?
Gaslighting is a form of manipulation that is perpetrated by pathological narcissists, mostly who are sociopathic in nature. They achieve power and control over others by convincing weaker, codependent people to believe things about themselves that aren't true. And the way that they convince the codependent victim to believe um, these narratives about themselves, say, no one likes you because you're shy, you're overweight, no one likes overweight people, you're too skinny, you don't speak English well enough, you have an anxiety problem, you're bald, you have too much hair. Whatever that narrative it is, it's a narrative that is meant to make the person feel bad about themselves. For gaslighting to work, the pathological narcissist has to manipulate the environment, systematically manipulate the environment to prove to their victim that this gaslighting narrative is correct. So once you can prove to the victim that they really have this problem or weakness or liability that they neither really have or people really judge them for, once they see it, then they lose hope and they become more isolated. Once isolated without hope, they depend more on the gaslighter to take care of them, and then the gaslighter achieves control. So in a nutshell, gaslighting is when you systematically manipulate a person to believe something about themselves, and through that, you prove it to them, and once they believe it, they become hopeless and they depend on the person who just lied and manipulated them.
That's so interesting. I'm thinking about now myself, and I just want to share something with you because you and I have talked a bit about my story. I mean, I come from corporate America, and I remember being in the CEO role, my first role at the age of 31, Ross, and I started having this experience, and I call it falling into the leadership graveyard, where difficult bosses started paralyzing me, and I didn't understand what was happening. I was leading a company that was part of a larger company. And there are a couple people that when I can just only say it to you this way, you've probably heard this from your patients, that when this person became involved with me anyway, I almost felt like I was paralyzed, like, somebody was sticking an ice pick in my eye. I literally couldn't function. And so I want to talk about self. You tell me the wording again. You have this 10-stage self-love recovery model. We don't have time to go through all that on the line today, and I encourage people to get the book and learn it. But here's the thing, Ross. I fell into some depression, some anxiety. I actually burned out, and I thought it was because I was working too hard because I was always a runner. That might be part of it, but I later learned that this was wired inside me. So give us a little bit about this self-care stuff, and how do people actually dig out of that, because you did it yourself?
Well, what I did over the last 4 or 5 years is I created a new explanation for codependency, and I just renamed it the self-love deficit disorder, and basically came up with a name that explained the problem. People who are these codependents who fall in love with narcissists, they have this deficiency of self-love, which comes from the attachment trauma of being raised by a narcissist and a codependent parent, which we talked about a few minutes ago. And so what I noticed is that there are so many people providing counseling, psychotherapy, or coaching services for codependency, and no one was getting better. People were still falling in love with the same narcissist and finding themselves in the same codependent patterns. Once I was able to identify that all the therapy approaches were Band-Aid, I call them Band-Aid therapy. They were working on the symptoms and not the problems. And I identified the problems. It opened up a door for me to come up with therapy solutions. So if you have self-love deficit disorder, that means the therapy has to um, resolve that. And to resolve that, you have to find out where it comes from. And it comes from deeply embedded trauma, shame, pathological loneliness, and addiction to narcissists. And ultimately, on top of this pyramid that I talk about, the symptoms of codependency. So self-love recovery is what I call the codependency cure. It solves the reason you fall in love with narcissists at the root of the problem. So I have all of those, all of this information. I in my company, Self Love Recovery Institute, I sell seminar videos and and programs to help people resolve or come to terms with what happened to them to build and heal the self-love deficiency and become self-loving. And when you're self-loving, you don't fall in love with narcissists anymore.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to give you a chance at the end here to tell people where they can get a hold of your body of work, Ross, because there's so many gifts in your book and the videos. I want to ask you about corporate America. I've learned this a long time ago, and there's another guru out there, Brene Brown, who you've probably heard of.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you're right up there in your work in parallel. And the thing I learned was about shame and vulnerability from her that. And I've seen it in corporate America that they don't want to talk about it. Leaders don't want to talk about it. So if you come across a leader and you're in your work with them, how do you get that person to sort of knock it off, get that person to sort of accept the fact that, they've got blind spots and get them to the point. And I remember Les Brown in one of his talks, he said something like, you got to work on your stuff, because if you park the car, you go backwards. How do you get people, first of all, in leadership to accept and then to do the self-work?
Well, it's virtually impossible to get someone in leadership to accept their pathological narcissism, if that's the problem, because the very nature of the problem, the primary symptom is you don't believe you have a problem and you blame other people for your problem. So if your leadership in your company has promotes pathological narcissism, or hires these folks, it's really difficult to change except from the top down. And that goes to the earlier question you asked me. But to get people to be more respecting and caring and patient, it comes from leaders that have to embody the very culture, the very traits that you want to see in others. I think Gandhi say, I think I have it written here, so you better be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And so if you want to change that part in your organization, you have to not only represent it, but if you are at a leadership position, you have to let people know that these are the rules. And then you have to practice what you preach.
Yeah, I love that. I really love the Gandhi saying. It's one that I'm going to go back to and listen to again, just to honor your talk here. I want to mention about two words, passion and purpose. And before we go further with those, go back to what you were saying about self-work. And I think really that's the gift in what you said there, is that we can't change the other person, and we have to work on ourselves first, find the tools to be able to figure out what's going on inside. They say people who love themselves first, Ross, wake up in the morning and they love themselves first. They can serve the world, but they find passions and they make time to do the things that they love to do. So what's one of your passions? What drives you and gets you up in the morning? What do you love to do?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things I love to do that sometimes that becomes my problem. But I love to create. I love to. I'm a blessed person. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. Is that I have these ideas come to me, and I like to take these ideas and put them into either written form as an article, a blog, or a part of my book, a video form, or bring them to my psychotherapy clients. And that has always been the passion, is to make a difference in the world. Back in the olden days, it was one person at a time. Now I think I have like 100,000 subscribers in YouTube, and I put a video out, and 2 weeks later it's been viewed 10,000 times. And I still have to pinch myself on the cheek because I never could have imagined that that would be my story. So to me, that gets me up, knowing that I am making the world a better place, and I have a job because of it, and it's also nice to get paid for it. So, and so, and then it's and then it's and this is work in progress for me because I'm not always good at it. But is to take care of myself, is to find joy and meaning in pursuits that have nothing to do with work, and allow myself to be selfish by just being nice to myself without having to create something. So that's what I work on.
That's awesome. I mean, you're also brilliant. You combine passion and purpose into one answer, which I love because it gives us time for something else as we move to wrapping up here. And that really is the tough question, as we move to the end here, which is about you. Are there tough days for you? Are there days where you sometimes feel you're going backwards? Because what I understand is this self-love, self-work is a life journey. You just have to keep, and you're dealing with people who sometimes have challenges. Your subconscious mind must have a lot in it. How do you keep going each day?
I would be lying to you if I told you I was always happy and full of self-love. I practice what I preach, and I tell people, I show people, I try to lead people to understand that the best you can get is being a part in a journey, being a passenger of your own journey with a destination that you dream of reaching, and to identify the trip itself as the fun part, the meaningful part. Because if you attach success to the destination, you're always waiting to get to the destination, and it's usually not as fun or not as meaningful as you thought, and so you're thinking about the next destination. So the answer to your question is I have ups and downs.
Well,
because
I got to tell you, I mean, that very statement makes you real. I love you. I love your show and everything that you're doing there. And there's a saying about humility, especially in the leadership world, and you have it, man. So really proud of that, Ross. I want to honor you with a few words before I turn it to you to tell us about your work. And these are words I've been writing down as you've been talking. I don't script it. I just write them. They're leadership words. The first one, it's a package, is love and humility, man. I mean, you're that, and you just proved that to us. Number two is you're a trailblazer. I've really looked into your work and what you're doing, and you're blazing a trail. And, with the 10 million viewers, gosh, you're waking up the quiet warriors out there. Number three is a voice of reason and wisdom. I'm sure you've heard this, but if you watch your videos and you listen to your voice, there's something about you. It's calming, and there's a ton of wisdom. And finally, leadership. I mean, if I looked in the dictionary, I'd expect to see your face under that word, because you're doing something that is really making a difference. And what I want to say, just to finish the word leadership, is, to me, leadership is somebody who can, keep it simple and get you to follow. And that's something that your work does. It blew my mind when I read your book about how simple it was to complex issues. So, Ross, tell us where people can get a hold of you and your body of work. Give yourself a plug.
Absolutely. I would recommend one of three places. Selfloverecovery.com is where you can get any of the stuff that I create, whether it's services, books, trainings, expert witnessing, whatever. Just me. Of course, my books are available on Amazon and YouTube. Just go youtube.com/Ross Rosenberg, and there you go. You'll see a couple of videos, and I hope that they help and potentially change some of your listeners' lives.
That's just awesome. And by the way, everybody listening, that's how humble this guy is. See a couple videos there when there's over 100. It's incredible. I want to say, everybody, that you've listened to Ross, find this show on iTunes, give it a rating so you can support his body of work. I highly recommend you check out his books, and particularly the most recent one, The Human Magnet Syndrome, The Codependent Narcissist Trap. What a read that is. And find that true purpose like Ross has. Live with action, and live that life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca